crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. Well, let's get into your life of law enforcement, being a radio talk show host, all of these things that are who you are. And to begin that journey, I want to know 4 years ago, we were trying to figure out this pandemic. How are we going to get out of it? What are the lasting effects? All of that. How did you survive that COVID time period? And how did it change the way that you live your life now?
Oh well, I actually during that time I had just been starting up my own business as a process server for the circuit courts,
Okay.
and that was kind of what I did after a little while after retiring from the police department. And I thought, I want something to do, and kind of that's I'll be flexible with time, and so I started that up, and that was right around the early 2019. And so I had a couple of clients, and it was picking up by the end of 2019 there. And of course, boom, February of 2020. And would you believe, starting in March, my business grew so much just in that time. Um, I don't know why, but basically, as a process server, you're the you've been served guy.
Yeah.
People kept suing each other. People kept doing all that stuff. Court still went on. I didn't really notice anything different.
Wow.
The courts still needed to have their paperwork served. People were still mad at other people, and were suing them. So it just, I don't know if COVID had any effect one way, in that increase in business. If it hadn't happened, I suspect that it would have pretty much been the same. But I was surprised that I seemed to pick up noticeably right then.
People are people are people, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's all there is to it. So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do right now in 2024. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders. It's career day. And one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
Well, I still am a process server,
Okay.
but basically for fun, I host the podcast, and in between those, I wrote my book, Small Town Cop, Big Time Crime. But all of it really, I do the podcast when I'm not working as a process server. I do the process serving when I'm not working on doing the podcast. Everything is kind of a stress relief from everything else.
Yeah.
Because after about 19 years as a police officer, the stress is unbearably high sometimes. Sometimes it's very boring. I'll admit that. Sometimes police work is very boring. But suddenly you have to be on notice instantly, and that's hard on the body. So doing process serving, it honestly, at this point, I wish I'd have done it 25 years ago, because it is the most stress-free job I've ever had. Um, it's serving paperwork. You have to know some legalities. You have to know some statutes and so forth. So you have to have some training and knowledge. But once you have that, you're not arresting people anymore. You're going to people's houses. I'm not dealing with drunks. It's a lot of driving and thinking. Because I have a lot of serves that are might be 50 miles away from each other in my area here of Wisconsin, and it's a lot of time to think
Yeah.
about things I can talk about on the podcast.
Yeah.
So I'll
Yeah.
get ideas really for both of them.
So it's a self-edifying kind of maneuver for sure. So
Certainly.
what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
My dream in the third grade, I wanted to be the shortstop of the Minnesota Twins. I
Okay.
thought absolutely for sure up to that point I was going to be the shortstop for the Minnesota Twins.
Yeah.
I was a big baseball fan. Loved the state of Minnesota. Being this part of western Wisconsin, we're closer to Minnesota really than we are to Green Bay or Milwaukee. Closer to Minneapolis, that is. And so they were my team. And really, after a little while, I was tried to be as much of an athlete in third grade as I could, and that was my first year in a new school.
Yeah.
And so, enjoyed baseball and all that. And one day we're outside at recess playing kickball, and so I thought I was pretty good. If there was a national professional kickball team, I probably would be on it. Uh, but there were two guys. I didn't really know them yet because it was early on in third grade there, and they were standing together, and you could tell these weren't the most athletic guys in the world in 8 years old, and they were talking to each other like this and with their thumbs in front of their mouths. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? You know, I run by a couple of times and I look at him, what are you guys doing? He said, and Ryan Peterson has come over to ask the announcers what we were doing. And I thought, oh wow, you're doing play by play. And I immediately was fascinated with that. I thought, wow, that might be more fun than playing the baseball game.
Yeah.
Actually. And so, you know, it didn't take long to start thinking maybe a news or radio career is for me. And shortly after that, you know, we actually went through the career day or something at school, or the what do you want to be when you grow up type of thing. And I found a book from the ABC News Network, or CBS rather, News Network, and it talked about a school in Minneapolis called Brown Institute back then, which was pretty much the Harvard of broadcasting schools in the Midwest in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Chances are back then, if you were in radio in the Midwest, you or somebody at your station went to Brown. And so third grade, I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Brown. I love Minneapolis. I might be able to do both. I'll go to school at Brown and still be the shortstop for the Minnesota Twins. And that part didn't work out. But, you know, I had that dream all through school then, graduated from high school. And just about the day I turned 18 years old, I moved to Minneapolis and started radio school at Brown Institute.
So how did you get into law enforcement? How did that become your life?
um, Part of it was because of a girl. But I got done with radio school, and within a couple of weeks, I was lucky. My first job called, and that was in Iowa. So went down to Iowa, did the interview, got hired for that, and started off as the overnight announcer in July of 1991 on the AM station, KOEL in Olwine, Iowa. And in school, you know, they gave us an idea of what we'd be making our first year in radio. And so I was talking to the program director on the phone, and he said, you know, after he said, how would you like a job? And I was flipping off you know, bouncing off the walls. And he said, how does $9.75 a month sound? I'm like, oh, wow. $9.75 a month. I was hoping for 1,000, but this is my first job. I'll take $9.75. And he said, got to let you know, we work 46 hours a week here. Oh, okay, that's fine. I'm 19 years old and thinking, you know, that's a piece of cake, the overnight. And so only years later did I actually figure that out. That 46 hours a week at $9.75 a month in 1991, I was making $5.30 an hour. And I was thrilled, but I was thrilled. I remember saying back then, gosh, I would pay these guys if I could be on the radio. I'd pay them to be on the radio. So for a 19-year-old kid, you know, it was my first shot at adulting. I had an apartment, you know, a little bit of independence, you know, a little bit of spending money, and it was fine for me then. Met a girl there. It was through the buddy on the FM of our station there on the FM station, and friends of friends, and so forth. And we ended up getting married. About the same time, I got an offer in Dubuque, Iowa. So, you know, the deal back then in the 90s with radio stations was, and really the only one who's done it right, love him or hate him, is Howard Stern. You know, you start off at the little rinky-dink radio station and work your way up to a bigger market all the time. And my dad told me, you know, even before the third grade, he said, son, if you're ever going to make it in life, make sure you make it to Dubuque. And so I did. I mean, I made it in Dubuque, and I was an evening drive announcer in Dubuque for a couple of years. We got married around that time, and then the station got sold after I'd been there about 3 or 4 years, and that was kind of it. They changed format, changed everything, and you know, being a radio guy, I knew that was going to happen at some point. And so I'm like, well, what do we do now? And my wife was working at some kind of educational, not in a school yet, but some educational situations there. And I thought, well, I've still got friends and family um, in Wisconsin, northwest Wisconsin, and law enforcement. It was just another one of those things. Since I got my driver's license, I thought, wouldn't it be neat? Wouldn't it be interesting to be a cop? You'd see somebody go through a red light, and you'd think, somebody should be able to do something about that.
Yeah.
So it was kind of more of I didn't like to see people getting away with things they were getting away with,
Yeah.
and that always stuck in my mind. But I was a radio guy, so I thought I'm not going to do anything about it. Well, at this time, it was a transition for me. I knew that I was going to do something different because this area, it's Eau Claire, Wisconsin, is the area, about 75 to 80,000 population, and at that time, it was a tough radio market to break into. So I got in part time at a station, but I thought, I got a wife now. I need something full time. And honest, I called up a sheriff's department and said, I'm new in town, but I know the area, and I'm thinking about a career in radio, or in law enforcement rather. And how could I do that? And I talked with the lieutenant, and he said, well, we've got a academy coming up in a couple of weeks, and if you have an associate degree in a law enforcement related career, then you may qualify. I don't know. Okay, well, I got an associate degree. It's a radio broadcasting degree. He said that'll work. So the communications all part of the gig. One thing led to another. All of a sudden, I'm walking into the police academy in Wisconsin,
Wow.
and yeah, they hired me as a part-time reserve officer, and that's what really started it there. I made it through the academy and went from there.
Wow, that's amazing. Who's been a hero for you? Who's been an inspiration for you?
Oh boy, family, of course, but early on, I remember even as far back as once I started thinking that I wanted to do radio. Larry King was one that I remember watching him a little bit as I grew older, I started to understand a little more of what he was talking about. But I remember thinking, this guy knows everything. He would interview anybody about anything, and as a kid growing up, I thought he can talk to anyone, and he's curious, and he seems to know everything, and he was funny sometimes. And so yeah, he was one that I wanted to be like Larry King.
Yeah.
um, and yeah, once I started at that overnight radio station, I actually was board operating for his syndicated show. So I got to
Wow.
listen to it all night long.
So, if you could have a dream interview right now with anybody on the planet, who would it be?
Wow. Barack Obama.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, he'd be a tough get,
Yeah.
but I admire him. I think he's so classy.
Yeah.
I think regardless of people's politics, he never had a scandal. I just like to talk to him about his beliefs, and of course what it's like to be president of the United States. But I do admire him.
Yeah, I would love to join you on that. Michelle Obama's book was really good, talking about his early years and who he was and how he was groomed. And it is amazing in this modern political clown show we have that this guy literally, the only transgression he did was wearing a tan suit one day.
Exactly. Yeah, tan suit, and what a scandal.
Yeah, it's
What?
terrible.
How could he possibly think that
And it was a good
that was
looking
okay?
suit. It was a great looking suit. I'd
Well,
love to
he
have
can
his,
pull it off.
yeah,
Yeah, he's a fit man. I couldn't do that, but
right. But he
but
he
yeah, he could pull it off.
he had it for sure. So, what has been the motive? What was the motivation for you all of those years to stand in front of danger, to do the job that you did every day in and day out, and then get to a point where you're still going after that dream of being a broadcaster?
Yeah, it was always in my mind, and um, I guess once you kind of get in that realm of something like law enforcement, they instill it in you in the academy that this is honorable. It's a pretty good living. You can raise a family on a police officer salary, and so you buy into it, and you realize the difference between right and wrong, and the difference between, and there, there was a point where I got to understand there's a difference between right and wrong, and between illegal and legal. Right and wrong doesn't necessarily mean legal,
Yeah.
or illegal. There's a difference there that sometimes you got to cross that line. And so yeah, the more I learned, then the more passionate I got about it. And until I got to the point where, and I think it still is instilled to me to this day, that if I see somebody in distress, like I have at a couple other jobs that I've had, instinctively now, I am the first one to go to assist them. One real quick story: I was working in a call center in between that time when I didn't know that my process serving business was going to take off. So about 2019, after I retired from the police department, I was doing some call center work at a bank, and it was a very large call center, and another representative had typed in on our inside chat there that she said, I have a customer who is saying he's broke. He's calling the bank and says he's going to kill himself and he can't pay any of his bills. So she's typing this in chat. And, a couple of people said, we can't legally ask him, if he needs help unless he asks for it. That's bull. I said, I walked over to her. I said, this is a crisis. Get his name, get his phone number, get his address. I will go back to my phone and call his local emergency number, his local 911, basically. And so, yeah, it was taken care of. He got the help he needed while the bank representative was still on the phone, and it was a job done. It was really one of those myths that people think and hear about on TV, like thinking that somebody has to be missing for 48 hours before you can report them a missing person.
Yeah.
That's craziness.
Yeah.
The question for that, but just a little inside police officer work here. The answer to that is this strange behavior for your loved one, for your family member, whether it's a half hour or a day? Is this strange behavior? Have they ever done this before? And if the answer is yes, then okay, we'll put out a missing persons report right now.
Yeah.
We don't want to wait 24 hours for anything, the worst you can think of to happen to them,
Yeah.
and say, well, that's our policy. We work 48 hours. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, that's one of those things that TV has done to really hurt law enforcement.
For sure. So what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
I think it's advice that I got early on that I didn't necessarily listen to, that I realized later on I should have. And I think that is, the grass is not always greener on the other side. I still think to this day, if I'd have stayed at that first radio station I was at, I might still be there today. It's up and running yet. It has a much smaller staff than it did back then. But I was at the age about that time of, the person they likely would have made program director at the time when local radio died. But I was, off learning how to be a police officer at that time then. And I switched police departments once too. Actually, I'd been at 3 police departments because that second one just wasn't for me. And so if I'd stayed at the first department I was at, I'd likely still be there too. So it's you think you can go somewhere else and they'll miss you where you have been. That's just not true. I think people need to always remember that. When you have a good job, unless they tell you to leave, probably the best thing to do is just stay there and do the best you can. They won't miss you when you're gone. They've been there a long time before you. They'll be a long time there after you.
So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into that 19-year-old that's getting ready to go to Iowa, the dreams of broadcast stardom, and you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've led, the wisdom you've gained along the way. What advice would you impart on that young version? And would that version of you listen?
I think so. I would say, and something I aspire to today, um, stay ethical.
Yeah.
Keep your ethical mindset. And I had that a little bit before I got into law enforcement. It really grew then. I realized how important it is. Friends, family, as a husband, I've been married now for 30 years. I have two wonderful sons who are both over 20 years old, doing very well. One's a history teacher, the other one is a machinist here in the area. Both have degrees, and so I think I've passed my ethics onto them. And I would say definitely, I might not understand at 19 years old that it's as important as I feel now at 53. But it's something I hope at 19 I would remember to keep in mind all the time.
So, of everything you've done and evolved into and achieved, what are you the proudest of?
I think becoming a police officer, honestly, with no experience beforehand. I basically walked from a radio station into a police department, into a police station, and said, "Hey, can I do this?" And they said, "Okay." I hadn't shot a gun yet before I became a police officer.
Wow.
Before I went to the police academy, I never shot a gun, so I learned at the academy. And funny story about that is going to be in the book in the next one. But it was a 12-week course back then, and on the 12th week you test out of everything. And so testing day came for the firearms range. I was so nervous. We got into the academy there and checked in as we do every morning, and then go to be seated in the classroom, and my stomach is churning. I'm so nervous, and it just gets worse and worse throughout the morning, knowing that the shoot, the test is in the afternoon. And so I'm in the bathroom, in and out of the bathroom, and we've all been nervous and have a nervous stomach. So I'm going back and forth, and finally it's time to go to the shoot at the range, and it's just getting worse and worse. I'm getting so nervous, and because I knew I wasn't a good shot yet. And there was one guy who we kind of stuck together throughout the academy, because he didn't have a lot of experience before that either. And so we stuck together, and we're standing next to each other at the range. And the lieutenant there, who was the firearms instructor, told us to get started. And so we get in the rollover prone position, and we're down on the ground. And I realized once I put one knee on the ground, uh-oh, this could be explosive. And I'm thinking, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And I was noticing nothing else that was going on around me. Other people are shooting. I'm just thinking, what do I do? And I had to get up, and it was about 100-yard dash to the pavilion where there was a restroom. And I'm going and going and going and hoping I'm going to make it, and hoping I'm going to make it. So and this guy that I was had latched onto, his name was Gary. And I'm running to the pavilion. I throw open the door. The bathroom is in the corner. I throw open the bathroom door, look inside. It's a one stall bathroom, and there is Gary leaning over the toilet, throwing up. I like, Gary, I got an emergency too.
Yeah.
So I stood out in the lobby area there, the classroom, and he got done doing what he was doing. I went in and did what I was doing. We both kind of had to alternate to finish up.
Yeah.
But we eventually got through everything and
Yeah.
got ourselves cleaned out, and and
Wow.
went on to do the shoot. Went on to do the shoot, and it all worked out.
That's
So
great.
once we got through everything and the nerves were gone, then we could finish up.
You were good to go. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, all your listeners, readers, but you lead the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think a guy who still, I try to portray the ethics on the radio. I always did. Was when I was in local radio, that I'm a genuine guy. I'm a genuine Midwest guy. I don't really try to sugarcoat myself. I talk like this out and about. When I'm giving people tickets, I talk like this. I don't, I even on the radio to dispatch, I wouldn't say there's a 1046, that's a 357 on, I would say there's a dead deer on the corner.
Yeah.
And that's how I talk. I use real speak, and I talk in real way, relatable way to people I talk to, because people don't talk cop speak, and there's radio terms that the radio guys use that people don't talk that way. And so I try to come across as genuine and relatable, and I think people understand that. I hope so, anyway.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to listen to your podcast, they want to pick up your book, they want to learn more about you, any of the good business, where do they go?
The podcast website is discerningtheunknown.com, and I put past episodes on there. It is being revamped right now, but it's all there right now, and a lot of stories about me and kind of what I've done the last several years, going from radio to law enforcement. I retired. It was an 18-year career pretty much, and I retired as chief of police just before COVID, a couple years before COVID. And the book, again, is Small Town Cop, Big Time Crime. It's complete fiction. It's for people in my little town right outside of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Here, they might recognize, that name sounds a little bit like our mayor, but not quite. A little bit. But it's complete fiction, and that's ryanpeterson.net. To get information about that. And then the podcast is on everywhere. It's a video podcast, so YouTube, and then everywhere else, Spotify and all those.
All the good places. Right on. This has been wonderful. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for your story. Thank you for what you've done. I feel a lot of kinship to what you went through. I went into broadcasting. I was in Kansas City. I used to go up to Iowa to the minor league teams and dream about going up there. Drove through Dubuque to get to Dyersville to see the Field of Dreams. Lots of time locked up there.
Oh, yeah. That was fun.
Just a good place to dream. This has been great. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you very much. You take care.
Take care.